hospital hallway was dimly lit, the fluorescent lights flickering slightly overhead. Alma moved swiftly through the corridor, her white nurse's scrubs brushing softly with each step. She clutched a patient's chart to her chest, her expression controlled, professional, composed, distant. But when she reached the room and pushed the door open, something inside her shifted. She froze. There he was. Her father, Jacob, James, lay unconscious on the hospital bed, his body frail. And still, a nasal cannula delivering oxygen, machines blinking steadily beside him. The years had not been kind. His face was thinner, sunken in places where once it had been hard and proud. For a moment, Alma couldn't breathe. A doctor stepped beside her, voice quiet, clinical. She's the only family who showed up. Alma didn't respond. Her eyes flickered to the second bed, and a sharp breath caught in her throat. Caleb, her baby brother, now a young man, barely 20, yet he looked so much smaller than she remembered. Pale, weak, sunken-eyed. He was awake, but his gaze was glassy, unfocused, as if the pain had hollowed him out from the inside. She hadn't seen him since he was 10. She had walked away when their father had made it clear that Caleb was the only child that mattered. The nurse leaned in, breaking the silence. "You're listed as the emergency contact," she said softly. "They've got no one else." No one else. Alma stood there, unmoving, her body stiff, mind screaming. Memories rushed in, uninvited, the night she was thrown out at 16, for questioning her father's love, the countless days she'd begged to stay, the years of silence that followed. He had chosen Caleb, always Caleb, and yet, here she was, she hadn't spoken to either of them in 10 years. She had rebuilt her life brick by painful brick, carved a new path without them. She had promised herself she was done, that she didn't need them, that she was free. But still, she came anyway. The memory came back like smoke, thick, choking, impossible to escape. Alma was 15 again, sitting on the edge of a worn-out sofa in their dusty family home. Her small hands trembled as she watched her mother, pale and exhausted, packing a small overnight bag. Her eyes were red from crying, lips trembling. From the hallway came the sound of her father's voice, loud and cruel. "It's your fault your mother died." The words struck like a fist. Alma flinched, pressing her back against the wall, her own tears falling silently. Her mother had died giving birth to Caleb, and somehow her father had found a way to lay the blame at her feet. The firstborn, the girl, After that day, everything changed. The grief twisted her father into something unrecognizable. He no longer looked at Alma the same. The warmth vanished from his eyes. The bruises weren't always visible, but they were there in the slaps of silence, in the meals withheld, in the way he looked through her like she wasn't even human. He said she had cursed the family, called her bad luck, a burden. And once Caleb started walking, it was as if Alma had never existed. The boy became his entire world. Her textbooks were torn apart one morning when he caught her studying instead of making dinner. He threw them into the fire, told her girls had no use for education. Her allowance disappeared, her dresses became hand-me-downs from neighbors. And when she asked for sanitary pads, he sneered and said, "Use cloth like your mother did. You think you're a queen." But Alma fought back, quietly at first. She studied in secret, hid books in pillowcases, read by torchlight when everyone was asleep. It was her only lifeline, her only rebellion. At 17, she refused to quit school and stay home to raise Caleb, the final act of defiance. Her father dragged her out that night. No suitcase, no money, just the school uniform she was wearing. He didn't even look back as he slammed the door. Since then, Alma had built her life in the shadows. She lived in a cramped apartment in the back of a converted shop. The paint peeled from the walls, and the floor creaked with every step, but it was hers. She worked long shifts at the hospital, sometimes pulling doubles to avoid going home to the silence. She didn't keep family photos, no birthday calls, no holidays. She told people her parents were dead, and in many ways, they were. When the first call came from the hospital, she ignored it. Then the second, the third, she blocked the number. But the voicemails kept coming, until one finally slipped through. She stood in her small kitchen, stirring tea, when her phone lit up. A voice cracked through the speaker, weak, familiar. Please. I'm sorry, it said. I think Dad's dying. I don't know what to do. It was Caleb. She listened to the message over and over again, each time with a different emotion swelling in her chest. Anger, sadness, confusion. A part of her wanted to delete it, to pretend it never existed. But another part, smaller, stubborn, refused. The boy she had once carried on her back, the baby she had fed while still a child herself, the little brother she had loved even when their father used him as a wedge between them, that boy was begging now. And despite the years, despite the scars, she hadn't erased him completely. She told herself she had no reason to go, but the truth was harder to swallow. Part of her had been waiting for something, a word, a crack in the wall, an apology, even if it was broken. She hit replay one more time. Please, I'm sorry. She closed her eyes. She knew she would. Go. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. Alma stood in the doorway, her arms tightly crossed over her chest, her back rigid, every muscle tense. She had told herself she wouldn't come, that she didn't care. But now, standing just a few feet from the brother she hadn't seen in 10 years, she couldn't look away. Caleb was barely recognizable. The little boy she remembered, full cheeks, curious eyes, always tugging at her shirt to be carried, was gone. In his place was a gaunt young man with hollow eyes and cracked lips. His skin clung tightly to his bones, and every breath rattled in his chest like broken glass. A cough ripped through him as she entered, blood spotting the tissue he pressed to his mouth. When he looked up and saw her, he started to cry. Alma stayed frozen, her expression unreadable. He reached a trembling hand toward her, but didn't expect her to take it. I remember you, Caleb whispered, his voice rasping. You were always the one holding me. The words hit her harder than she expected. For years, she'd believed he'd forgotten her, or worse, that he resented her too. She didn't speak, but her arms loosened slightly. Caleb gave a small, bitter laugh that turned into another cough. After Mum died, Dad never let me ask about you. He said you didn't want us, that you left because you hated us. Alma felt something tighten in her throat. He made me believe you forgot. Me, Caleb whispered, barely audible. But I never did. I used to dream about your stories, the way you sang me to sleep. Alma turned her face slightly away, jaw clenched. The memories came flooding back. Lullabies hummed over kerosene lamps, tiny arms wrapped around her neck, promises whispered into the dark that she'd never leave him. But she had. She was forced to. Asterisk, Caleb's voice cracked again. He collapsed last week. Stroke. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I kept thinking, maybe if you knew, you'd come. Asterisk, she said nothing for a long time, her eyes drifting. To the machines, the worn blankets, the corner of the room where an envelope of unpaid bills sat like a quiet threat. Asterisk, he spent everything, Caleb added, on lawyers, fights, stupid pride. He wouldn't ask for help, not even when I got sick. Asterisk, Alma finally spoke. Her voice was flat, tired. I'm not here to save you. Asterisk, Caleb nodded slowly. I know. Asterisk, they sat in silence, a decade's worth of pain pressing between them like thick air. Then the doctor stepped in, holding a clipboard. He glanced between them, his voice brisk. Asterisk, we need to act fast. His lungs are severely infected. Without treatment, it won't be long. We also have surgery prep for Mr. James if we want to try. To preserve basic brain function. Asterisk, he handed Alma a folder. Itemized bills, urgent forms, all of it neatly stapled, like the pain could be managed with paperwork. The total was more than she made in 3 months. Asterisk, we'll need a signature to move forward. Asterisk, Alma stared at the folder for a long time, then at Caleb, whose head had dropped back against the pillow. His eyes fluttered, exhausted. He didn't ask, he didn't beg. No one else would come. She sighed, low and defeated, then took the pen. Asterisk, she signed the papers anyway. Asterisk, Alma didn't want to bring Caleb home, but there was nowhere else to send him. After the hospital discharged him, too weak to manage on his own and with no money to his name, she let him sleep on her couch, a lumpy, hand-me-down thing that sagged in the middle. She gave him a pillow and a thin blanket, not out of warmth but out of obligation. They barely spoke those first few days. Asterisk, she made dinner in silence, served 2 plates, and left his on the table without a word. He cleaned his dishes without being told, coughed through the nights, and mostly kept to himself. The silence between them felt ancient, filled with things unsaid, scars neither of them had the language to expose. Asterisk, Alma buried herself in work, double shifts at the hospital, volunteer hours on weekends. Anything to stay busy, anything to stay distracted. But even distraction had its limits. Asterisk, one night, long after midnight, she got up for water and heard soft sobs echoing from the bathroom. She stood outside the door, unsure if she should knock. Finally, she pushed it open gently. Asterisk, Caleb was sitting on the edge of the tub, hunched over, his face buried in his hands. He looked like a child again, lost, sick, tired. His voice cracked when he spoke. Asterisk, I didn't ask to be the golden child. He whispered. Asterisk, Alma stood in the doorway, arms folded tightly. Her face was unreadable, but her voice came low and bitter. Asterisk, and I didn't ask to be thrown away. Asterisk, he didn't respond, just kept crying, and Alma didn't move. After a moment, she turned and walked back to bed, the ache in her chest growing heavier. Asterisk, the next morning, she found him sitting at the kitchen table, trying to help fold laundry. The effort was clumsy, his hands still shaking from fatigue. But she didn't stop him. Asterisk, that same day at the hospital, Jacob opened his eyes. Asterisk, it was brief, a flicker of movement, a grunt, a shift of his fingers. The doctors said he was regaining partial consciousness. Alma stood at his bedside, unreadable, watching the man who once ruled her childhood like a tyrant. When his eyes met hers, cloudy but unmistakably sharp. The first thing he muttered was, "Still wasting your time on things. That won't bring your mother back." Asterisk, the words were like a blade. She didn't respond. Her hands trembled slightly, but she turned and walked out before anyone could see. Asterisk, but the next day, she showed up again. Asterisk, every day she returned, no matter how much it cost her. She monitored his charts, asked the nurses questions, signed the necessary papers, but he never thanked her, never acknowledged her. He looked through her like she was a stranger. Asterisk, at home, the air between her and Caleb began to change in small ways. She started leaving tea by the couch in the mornings. He started washing her uniforms without asking. Asterisk, neither of them apologized. But the silence was less sharp now, more tired than angry. Asterisk, one afternoon, while Alma was at work, Caleb wandered into the narrow hallway closet looking for a blanket. In the back, behind a box of old first aid supplies and a broken fan, he found an old worn-out notebook, its edges frayed, its cover faded. Her journal, asterisk, he didn't mean to read it. He told himself he wouldn't, but something about it pulled him in. Asterisk, he read in silence, curled on the couch with the journal in his lap. Asterisk, page after page revealed a world he had never known. A 17-year-old Alma walking the streets barefoot, sleeping in stairwells when shelters were full, eating one slice of bread a day. There were entries written in desperation, some in anger, others in complete numbness. One entry simply said, "He doesn't miss me. I don't think Caleb even remembers me." Asterisk, another, "I saw a girl playing with her baby brother today. I had to run into a bathroom to cry. I miss holding him. I miss the way he smiled at me when he was too young to know he shouldn't." By the time he reached the final pages, his face was soaked with tears. He had always believed her absence was a choice, that she had simply given up on them. He had never realized the weight she'd carried, the wounds she never let anyone see. Asterisk, when Alma came home that night, exhausted from another shift, she found the journal sitting on the table. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Asterisk, Caleb looked up at her, eyes red. Asterisk, "I'm sorry," he said. She didn't reply, but for the first time in a long while, she didn't look away. Asterisk, the walls of the hospital seemed to close in on Alma as the day unraveled. Caleb had taken a sharp turn, struggling to breathe, lips turning blue before the nurses rushed in, alarms blaring. Within minutes, he was wheeled down the corridor for emergency surgery, leaving Alma behind with shaking hands and a hollow ache in her chest. She had barely caught her breath when the call came. Jacob had relapsed. A second stroke. Not as severe, but enough to pull her away from the waiting room and into the very place she didn't want to be. Asterisk, his hospital room was too quiet. Machines hummed steadily, oxygen hissing in the background. Jacob lay there, eyes, half-open face, gaunt and sallow. For a moment, Alma just stared at him, the man who had made her life a series of survival stories. Her hands clenched at her sides. Then the dam broke. "You made me invisible," she whispered, stepping closer. Her voice shook, low and raw. "You called me cursed. You destroyed me." Asterisk, Jacob turned his head slightly, as if hearing her through. A fog, his lips barely moved, but the words still sliced through the silence. Asterisk, "I did what I had to," he muttered. "Sons carry the name." Alma flinched, her face contorting as tears threatened. "Sons carry the name," she repeated, almost laughing through the pain. "You think this was about a name?" Asterisk, her voice rose with each word. I carried this whole family. I buried my mother while you blamed me. I raised Caleb when you were too broken to look after him. I held that boy's hand when he had nightmares, when he was burning with fever. And when you threw me out like trash, I still survived. I still became someone. And now, after all that, I'm the one paying your bills. I'm the one saving your life. Asterisk, the door creaked open and a nurse stepped in, wide-eyed. Ma'am, please, you need to calm down. But Alma didn't even hear her. Her voice cracked as she took one trembling step forward. Asterisk, and through all of it, you still can't even say my name. Asterisk, Jacob blinked, slowly. For a long moment, it was as if the machines were the only things breathing. Asterisk then. Finally, with a broken breath and a whisper so fragile it almost dissolved into air, he spoke. Asterisk, Alma, her name, he said it. Asterisk, for the first time in 20 years, he said her name. Asterisk, Alma stood there, trembling with rage, with grief, with something else she couldn't name. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of being seen. The worst had passed. Caleb survived the surgery. It had been close, hours of waiting, pacing, bargaining with a god. Alma wasn't sure she still believed in, but he came through. Now, days later, he lay in her small apartment again, this time propped up with pillows, a blanket tucked neatly around him. Alma sat at his side, gently feeding him spoonfuls of warm soup. They spoke in soft voices, the weight of past years still present, but no longer crushing. Asterisk, you look like a mum. Caleb teased weakly, grinning through chapped lips. Asterisk, Alma smirked. Don't push your luck. I can still take the soup away. Asterisk, he laughed, then coughed, and she handed him a napkin, her eyes gentle but watchful. The silence between them was easier now, not heavy, but restful, forgiving. Asterisk, meanwhile, Jacob had been moved to a long-term care facility. The second stroke had left his speech muddled, his body frail. Alma still visited, not out of duty, but out of closure. He offered her an apology once, halting and rough, barely audible. But by then, she no longer needed it. Asterisk, the power he once held over her had faded. She didn't come for his words. She came to confirm what she already knew. He couldn't break her anymore. Peace didn't come because he changed. It came because she did. Asterisk, one quiet evening, Alma sat at the kitchen table, a scholarship form open on her laptop. An international nursing program was offering full tuition and housing abroad, a dream she'd once buried beneath rent. Survival and silence. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as doubt crept in, uninvited. Asterisk, Caleb noticed. You should do it, he said softly from the couch. Apply. Go. You gave us more than we ever deserved. Asterisk, Alma looked at him, her throat tightening. The boy who once didn't know her name was now the man giving her permission to fly. She smiled. I will, she said. But not yet. Asterisk, he frowned. Why? Asterisk, she stood, crossed to him, and adjusted the blanket around his shoulders. Because I want to make sure you can stand on your own first. Asterisk, it wasn't sacrifice. It wasn't guilt. It was choice. Asterisk, and for the first time in her life, Alma was choosing from a place of strength, not pain. Asterisk, she stayed, not because she was needed, but because she was free to choose. The evening was warm, the kind of quiet that wrapped gently around the walls of Alma's small apartment. She stepped through the door after a long shift, keys jingling softly in her hand, shoulders heavy with the day. But something felt different. The apartment smelled like spices and stew. The floors were swept, the couch cushions fluffed. On the small dining table, a simple meal was set. 2 plates, 2 glasses of water, and in the center, a small bouquet of flowers wrapped in newspaper. Caleb stood nearby, smiling nervously. I know it's not enough, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. But it's a start. Alma froze, lips parting slightly. Her eyes welled up before she could stop them. For so long, she had carried the weight alone. To see him try, not out of guilt, but love, cracked something open in her. She sat down quietly, wiping a tear before it could fall. They ate. In silence, soft and safe. After a while, Caleb looked at her with that same quiet awe he'd had as a child. You didn't have to take us in. Alma looked down at her plate, then back at him, her voice steady. Maybe not, she said, but I remember who I wanted to be before he broke me. Caleb leaned forward slightly. And who was that? She smiled, faint but sure. Someone who shows up, she said, even when no one ever did for her. They didn't speak after that. They didn't need to. The camera lingered on Alma's face, lined with exhaustion, but soft now, strong. At peace, she didn't need validation or apology or even recognition. She had chosen, and she had survived. And despite everything, he was still her brother.